Would you agree?
I think with best play, black should be able to hold this one, but suddenly there are threats. White's bishops are now better than black's bishops, and look at the clock as well.
Yeah.
There is a gap opening up there, so black now, he's deep in thought. And he's got 3 minutes less than Wesley. All of those small factors combined means it's very difficult in practical terms to actually play this position with a cool head.
Yeah.
And, okay, he decides to push a pawn. So, logical, he's opened up the black bishop, again, the black dark squared bishop. He's freed up that diagonal, but every time you push a pawn, you're going to leave weaknesses behind, leave some weak squares behind. And Wesley now has a move to start creating some threats again, if he can.
Yeah, he has many moves, actually, to go forward. And now, because that pawn has taken a step forward, 2 squares, I mean, I'm comparing it to where it started off with on the f7 square, now the rook can actually step forward, a la Jorden and Foreest, and just play a little bit defensively before the action ensues. So there's kind of consequences to that pawn move. I think White's position is a little bit of a dream.
Yeah.
But how to continue, that is always the issue. And David, how would you continue? How would you just turn those screws?
Yeah, I agree with you, Jovanka. Ideally, before White takes any kind of concrete action, White wants to improve his rook. If you look at White's rook in the bottom left corner, that rook is trapped in, that rook's not doing anything, and the only way to get that rook active is to actually move the other rook first. So, as you mentioned, Jovanka, I'm not sure exactly which square I'd go for, but if you lift up White's rook on the c-line, if you move that away, clear the path for your other rook later on. Once that rook enters the action, then you start going for the threats, maybe the captures. The only other really tempting move for me would be to take that black knight with White's light squared bishop. But as you mentioned, the white bishops are so pretty, and I don't think I have the heart to kind of part with them, to say goodbye to one of those bishops yet. Sometimes you just got to trust the aesthetic value in the position. You just got to look, oh, my best 2 pieces are the bishops, so let's not touch them yet. So probably I would just move my rook and kind of maintain the tension.
I got a Leo and Kate Titanic image in my head right there.
Just me on the edge of the boat, just holding the bishop up.
Oh, yeah, that is a nice image. All right, we do have the first game result from first rounds in the quarterfinals. Alireza Borussia with the white pieces played a draw against Liem. So their game number 2, Liem will then have the white pieces, will be coming up in about 13 minutes or so.
Yeah. And so whilst Wesley is actually thinking about how he's going to improve the position, well, for our quiz of the day, we're asking which moment in sports history shocked you the most, and of course, why? And well, we have a few answers. Andy says that they were shocked by the Alekhine-Capablanca 1927 match when they were following it online by the Telegraph. I quite like that one. I mean, takes some doing to follow it live, huh?
Wow.
Yeah. And Connor815 on Instagram says Michael Jordan announcing that they were going into retirement for the first time. I mean, a man at the top of the game decides to leave the sport.
Yeah.
Yeah, to this day, riddled with controversy.
Yeah.
And Harry Yaner says when Mike Tyson bites Evander Holyfield's ear. Yeah, that was a shocking moment, certainly. And if you want to enter our competition to win one of these 3 chessable courses, well, you can tweet your answer using the hashtag. And, well, I just hear the pling, and it tells me that, well, Wesley has made a move.
And it's the move you wanted, Jovanka.
Yes.
Just lifting that rook up 1 square, partly to protect some pawns along that second row. But most of all, the main reason behind that move is to free up the other rook. The other rook now has the license to start developing itself and start finding some better lines. So, OK, Wesley slightly shaking his head there. Maybe he was frustrated that he couldn't find anything more direct, but it looks like a decent move. He's just maintaining the status quo and passing the problem back to Jorden. It's not clear how black improves either.
I have a confession to make. Because I'm not using the computer so much, when the grandmasters play a move that I've suggested, and I am an international master, so I have around about 2,400 in rating, I kind of feel like bingo. They've called my numbers out. I'm like, yes. Does anyone else at home feel like that? We have a lot of fun in the studio. So if you do want to join in the conversation, then you can always tweet us any questions or anything using the hashtag #ChessChamps. And we have a move from Jorden. He's retreated the bishop. That one I didn't predict. Did you predict that one, David?
I did not predict that one. It was kind of on my radar. I thought that black bishop was in the way of the black rooks, but it felt like maybe there were more urgent things to do. And Wesley didn't hesitate. He reacts instantly by bringing the white knight off the edge of the board. That's always important, centralizing it. And now look at those black pawns, those 3 black pawns over there on the left. Suddenly, they're feeling very loose. White knight is threatening to go and capture one of them right now. And more importantly, one of the black pawns is protecting the black knight. So the black knight now has to move. The pawn behind it, the pawn protecting it, was about to drop off. So the black knight went to attack the white rook. White's rook shifted, and now black has pushed a pawn, attacking white's knight. And big moment now for Wesley. So does he have to retreat that knight? If he retreats that knight, black is completely fine, but he needs to find something else. He needs to find something better. And actually, I think you shouldn't retreat the white knight right now. That would just show weakness, and that would allow black everything he wants. That would allow the black pawns to push forward. So instead of retreating the white knight, counterattack against the black knight, and that's the only logical follow-up from Wesley So's last moves.
Definitely. Now, there's a word of warning when it comes to counterattacking. You must calculate very carefully. And by calculating, I mean you must calculate those checks, those captures, and all the attacks on every single possible capture on the board. And David, wow, he has not taken your advice. Wesley has, in fact, retreated the knight. And suddenly, I'm just looking at the progression of the bar. It's not liking it. It's dancing towards the dark side.
But it's also that last move. It's illogical. That knight was placed on that square just, what was it, 3 moves ago, and he's retreated it back. He's actually helped black improve his pieces in the meantime. And I think we have to show this because there was a big opportunity for Wesley. So he's just retreated his knight here to the side of the board, a bad square. But if instead of retreating it, if he'd counterattacked against the black knight, if he'd pushed his pawn forward, this black knight is actually trapped. It has no safe square to retreat to, no safe square to go back to. So instead, black has to capture the white knight. He has to say, OK, I trust you. He's going to take. We'll see a trade of knights. But after black takes this pawn, suddenly we see this rook is springing to life. This rook can go and capture black's pawn. And suddenly, this rook is active, attacking this guy. Suddenly, these bishops still controlling some very important squares. Black is unable to move, really, in a productive way. This pawn can never advance, and it's a clear target. If it ever moves, it's going to be taken by one of white's bishops. And still, no material advantage for white, but in terms of positional chess, you've improved your pieces, especially this rook. And this would be a long-term edge for Wesley. Instead, now in the game situation, he's brought his knight back, and black's actually grabbed a pawn. Wow, Jorden going ambitious now. He snatched a pawn at the edge of the board. This knight is protected by its bishop. So black's just a pawn up. Wow. Jorden now seizing the opportunity to grab that pawn. Maybe Wesley forgot about it over there on the edge of the board. That is brave by Jorden to misplace your knight so badly, but a pawn is a pawn. And if he can keep it, if he has time to retreat his knight, bring it back, then he's just going to be better. And
I do like Jorden's gutsy decision, and we do have a few moves. Wow, there's been a flurry of moves, and they've all been, well, very direct moves from Wesley. Wesley's just gone about attacking the black rooks.
Yeah. Look at those white bishops. You said that pincer movement earlier, right? One of white's bishops went to attack the rooks. The other one went to attack the other rook. And suddenly things are really heating up. And Jorden, he's been forced to place his rook on a bad square to keep it safe. But maybe that's OK for now. He's gained time, at least, for the black knight to jump back if it wants to. And, OK, Wesley bringing his rook into the position. Wow. That's the type of move Wesley wants to play, but I'm not so sure. I think the black knight can just retreat now. And white's rook on the 7th row, it's active, but black's going to start gaining time himself. If the black knight retreats, he's going to attack the white bishop. And Jorden, suddenly I'm optimistic about his chances again. I'm
very optimistic as well, because I really like the move that you've actually suggested. Retreating the black knight is out there on a limb. And what's even better is it attacking the light-squared bishop. And Wesley, I think, is going into hustle mode here. He has to. He's a pawn down. He just instantly retreated the bishop.
Wow,
so he's playing those. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Actually, I think that's a really sneaky idea here for Jorden, but it's not obvious, and it's very difficult to see, actually.
Show us.
But yeah, I've got to show this on the board, because I think the way Jorden can get an advantage for black is actually to bring his knight down and go on the attack this white rook. This rook has to move no matter where it goes. For example, if it attacks the black knight, then you just ignore this. You drop your bishop back, attacking this rook, but more importantly, attacking the knight behind it. And because you've kicked away the other rook, this knight is undefended. If the white rook moves, you take this knight and you defend your own knight in the process. And this would actually win material for Jorden van Foreest. Actually, this move, if he does find it now, bringing his knight to this square, attacking this rook, would give him almost a winning advantage. I'm not so sure I would find it. It's actually, this move is easy, the first one, bringing the knight here, but the second move, dropping the bishop back, this is the hard one. That second move is the most difficult one.
But actually, if you've kind of ingrained in yourself all those kind of calculation rules that we keep on telling ourselves about, that, you've got to look at those attacks first, you actually spot it quite easily.
Yeah, it's all about those threats.
And I agree. Has gone under 1 minute, Jorden van Foreest.
Oh,
yeah, let's go back to the cameras. Yeah. Will he find this? But it is that key. Just it was coined by John Nunn, right? The English grandmaster. LPDO, loose pieces drop off. And once you think about it, white's rook in the corner, undefended, you attack it. Once it moves, you attack white's other undefended pieces, the other rook, and that knight on the edge of the board.
He doesn't find it, David.
He doesn't find it.
He swings his rook across. Now, this also looks like a good move, actually. After all, the rook is now pinning the knight. OK, well, Wesley is now doing that exact same idea that you showed to Jorden. Now that bishop attack has attacked the rook and the knight simultaneously.
Yeah, position is getting crazy now. Everything's under fire. All the pieces under attack. Black's rook at the top of the board under attack. Black's knight as well. So he has to find maybe a couple of moves if he wants to maintain the advantage. Stockfish there, the computer confirmed that actually that was one of the best moves, to use a pawn to protect the black knight, to block that bishop's attack, and actually giving up a rook for bishop in the process. And now black should recapture that bishop with his king.
Okay.
That's difficult. He finds it. Suddenly now black is material down. He's down a rook for a bishop and a pawn. But the main problem is actually on the A line for white. If you look at the black rook and the white rook, there's tension there. The white knight is pinned and maybe doomed.
Yeah.
Wow.
And just look at those two black bishops just raking down the board. And I agree with you, David. There's a serious problem with that white knight that's stranded on the edge of the board. Just can't get out. Yeah. And the next move that black is going to play is simply to attack that knight, and the knight can't move. And that is going to be a serious problem.
Yeah. There are a few ideas for black, actually, to attack that knight with a pawn, but also to drop the bishop back in the manner that we showed a bit earlier on, kind of attacking the white rook and the knight behind it along this light square diagonal. So Jorden coming up with some really nice moves, actually, but only 20 seconds on the clock, 27 seconds. That's going to be the biggest hurdle for him to overcome, because if you give him 5 minutes here, I think Jordan's going to win this position as black. It's just too difficult for white to handle. But
the good news, though, is that, yes, he doesn't have so much time, but he gets an extra 10 seconds, isn't it, added per move.
10 seconds, can, especially in a complicated position, can disappear very quickly.
Yes, so, that's true.
Yeah, it's hard to call this one.
Yeah, but sometimes the hand movement, making that move is enough. And there are a few moves that Jorden can play just to generate some more time on the clock.
But maybe the problem is black's going to have some 2 or 3 nice choices.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't want choice. You just want one good move, you'll spot it, and every time Jorden will find that for sure. But if you have 2 or 3, sometimes you get caught up, you get indecisive. And
yeah, you can't be a perfectionist when you have time trouble. Just take that decision, make it quickly. OK, so Wesley checking the black king steps forward, and now Wesley has to find a move, and he moves his rook to the side, and now he's threatening to come forward and give another check to the king. I mean, I think the bar is quite clearly on black's side. Yeah, and Jorden, he finds a great move. He captures a pawn with his bishop. White's knight cannot actually go and take that bishop right now because of this pin on the A-line. White's rook in the corner would drop off. The black rook would capture it if that white knight moves. So White's rook has to move, and wow. I mean, if we look at the left side, black has a 3 versus 0 pawn advantage. One of those pawns is going to cause some damage later on. I think that move might be the winner for Jorden van Foreest long term. But this is a tricky move. The rook attacks the bishop retreats, and now the rook gives check. The king has to move. Easy decision, just move your king. I want to put it up the board. Yeah, that's just go F for forward. Yeah, that's the square I wanted it, F6. And now the white knight has to, well, has got too many squares. OK, all the way back.
The white knight, yeah, it could retreat to be protected by its rook, but maybe then black's light squared bishop would swoop down. Black's bishops now are the dream. Despite the fact white has a rook for one of those bishops, the bishops are better than the rooks.
Yeah, OK, so this is why Wesley just decides, OK, whatever, I'm just going to give up my knight for some pawns and hope for the best. So, well, Jorden does have an easy decision to make again. He can just step back with his king.
Yep, he can step back with his king. He can maybe block that check with his bishop, but you don't really want to pin yourself unless you really have to, so just step back with the king. OK, he does pin himself. He blocks that check.
I mean, OK, is there anything like rook takes knight in the air?
No.
No, there isn't. Of course, there isn't. That was a terrible move by me because the rook suddenly defends everything. OK.
So if we do a quick count here, we do see white has a rook, but in return, black has a bishop and a knight. And together, the bishop and the knight will be worth more. So 3 points each, that's 6, a rook only 5. So black is 1 point up, but more importantly, a pawn.
Yeah, I was going to say it there, David, is what's really, really important is those 2 minor pieces can escort that passed pawn that's there on the left side on the C line, and that pawn is just going to march itself forward, and it has the time to do this. And that is why Wesley has been forced to be tricky, and that's why he's pushed a pawn up the board, and his threat is actually just to create some kind of mischief and play pawn on and give a check to the black king, just to try to disrupt black's harmony. But Jorden says too easy for me to deal with.
Yeah, but that threat has been restored. So Wesley continuing to push pawns there. As you mentioned, Jovanka, he wants to push a pawn further up, give check to the black king, distract the black king away from the protection of its own bishops. And, OK, now Jorden decides to go for a rook trade. I'm not necessarily sure I like that one too much. Normally when you have minor pieces against a rook, you want to keep a rook for yourself in order to kind of complement your pieces in order to help them later on. But that rook trade has maybe made Jorden's task a bit easier. He's just got rid of some of the potential counterplay for white. And Wesley pushing pawns still. Yeah.
Wesley is really impressively doing his utmost to create some kind of trouble, some disturbance in the fourth there. And because the big threat is actually to play pawn takes pawn. The H pawn will take the pawn on G6.
Yeah, so black now has to make a decision. Okay, I would have said block it up, but
But now you can just take the pawn, not the H pawn, but the F pawn.
So you think white should capture towards the centre here. He does that. And now the black king has to step forward. Yeah, the reason maybe you didn't like this is because white has 2 central pawns now.
Yes, I mean, white certainly has some counterplay. And, well, if you still look at black's main task, which is to push his own passed pawn, the pawn that's standing on the C line, it's still a long way. It's not easy to coordinate. And taking a look at the clock situation, Jorden has coming up to 10 seconds left on the clock. And I feel that the momentum is shifting a little bit.
Yeah, he's made 2 very dubious decisions, actually. Trading the rooks off first as black, just going for safety first, but reducing his own winning chances. And secondly, allowing white these 2 connected central pawns. And now Wesley's going to start advancing them. There we go. 1 pawn steps forward. He's actually created a huge threat. He's threatening to push another one forward with a check. And that would have been a double attack. So first, Jorden moves his king away, attacking the white bishop. He has to start rolling that black pawn on that C line soon. Otherwise, the winning chances will disappear.
I was a little bit more afraid of the black king actually mobilising itself and trying to jam up those white pawns. OK, but we do have a move. Jorden has reactivated his dark square bishop,
doesn't seem to like any of the moves they're making right now.
No, it's a very difficult position. And right now, one wrong slip and it could mean a win for black, or it could mean just a dead draw. White's still fighting for the draw, but yeah, the reason the computer didn't like black's last move is because he's let white's king enter the action. He could have put his bishop on a different square, cutting off the white king. And white now, if he gets rid of black's 2 pawns, even at the cost of a rook, then he might even be able to make a draw. So, OK, black giving a check with his knight, that is hard to calculate, but that is a brave move. What happens now if white just steps his king towards that black knight? Suddenly the black knight will be attacked. One of black's bishops is attacked as well. Has Jorden calculated this?
He must have done. Knight check again.
OK, the knight checks again, but white's king could just continue stepping over towards that knight. You can attack the black knight and you can attack a bishop at the same time. I mean, I don't see what Jordan's really doing. I think he's panicking because of the clock situation. He's not coordinated his pieces perfectly. Suddenly his knight is off, just dancing around. not really coordinated, and the bishops are under fire from pawns. He hasn't got his own black pawns moving either.
Yeah, and that's the big problem, actually. So, while it's happened, David, the knight has been attacked, and therefore that's why Jorden gives another check. But the white king can step forward, or also you can play rook takes knight.
Take that knight
That's
off.
what I would do. Take the knight. Thank the Lord for the lucky. Okay, wait. Well, hang on a second. Wesley says no.
Okay, Wesley says no. He could have actually just taken off that black knight, and then after the rook was captured, taken off black's bishop in the middle of the board, and that would have simplified towards a draw probably. But maybe he thinks there's no reason to go into that. Maybe he thinks that this is good enough, and the position. This is the second time we've seen this position now. If black gives another check. Okay, threefold repetition, and it's a draw after all that drama.
Wow, wow. It was looking good for Jorden van Foreest with the black pieces against the almost unbeatable Wesley. So do you think he should have kept fighting there for a